I think that was powerful by Moyo. One more time. How people agree that Moyo needs to write a new book? Anybody? All right, that's good. Okay. All right, so.
I'm committing in the front of you all to writing another book.
Woo!
You
Amazing.
know what's funny about it though? I was thinking to myself, I wrote 3 books before I was 30.
Hmm.
And I'm like, what happened to the lost decade? Like, what am I doing with my life? And so hence why all of this is, it's meaningful to me because the way I see some of this is I see it as a reigniting of everything that God has placed on the inside of me as well. And I'm saying to myself that, you know what? I'm not going to hold back anymore. I'm not going to let my quote unquote humility get in the way of purpose and living a meaningful life. So yes, I will write a book. I will start a podcast. Amen.
Amen.
Yes. And yes, I will do that mentorship thing that he has talked about as well. So get ready, get ready, get ready.
Can I say something real quick?
Don't say it. Oh.
No, 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 no,
Don't
no, no,
add.
no. Actually, no, I'm not adding anything. It's fine.
Okay, say
You
it.
asked a question. You said, so where did the last decade go? And I think that part of the process of becoming is that sometimes there's what we call the silent years. And sometimes we even feel bad during that period because you're wondering, uh, this is me. I wrote 3 books before 30. Time is going. I know you've been trying to write a book.
I've been trying.
He's been trying. In fact, even when I joined the after I stopped joining him. Am I right? So I totally understand that. But I think that sometimes we downplay the season of becoming. And sometimes it's a season where we're kind of like hidden. But I think that hidden is just like, I think about the seed, that the seed needs to be in the ground, to be hidden, to become. But sometimes people are hidden and they're not doing anything. And this is, I think Moyo shared something very powerful I want to reiterate. One thing. What is one thing you can do? What is one thing you can do and then do that consistently? Because I think many times we have this grand plan, particularly if you've done business, you've done big things, if you want to do a program, you want 1,000 people in the hall. I always laugh, all right? Only you and your family will show up. I can promise you that. Okay, but the fact about it is that you become in the little things that you are doing. So you're reading. We're talking about maybe reading books, for example. You'll be shocked that some people are no longer reading except for exams. That's the truth about it. Reading for just investment. But what about that part about becoming? And I just wanted to urge somebody, in case you're in that season, there's a lot to me. I'm not where I'm meant to be and all that. Like you said, do not be discouraged and all that. But I'm grateful for that time. It helped me to first and foremost understand the environment, understand where I can begin to play. And there's so much that is going on. Even with Donald Trump, I think that we have great opportunities. I'm telling you, I think chaos actually carries opportunities. Keep your eyes on the chaos. Keep your eyes on the opportunities, all right? So you don't become a political commentator, am I right? While things are going on. But ultimately, behind everything, I think that God is moving. I think God, like I said, is our source of identity. I think God has a purpose for our life. I forgot to mention earlier, I said, what do I give to a rich man, all right, on his birthday? If I give him gold, he has gold. So, brother, no gold for you, all right? so, but
I'm always still looking for gold though.
more
So
gold.
don't get it twisted.
Okay, all right, I'm messing with you, all right. So I wrote a book recently, and I decided I'm going to give everybody a free copy. I came with that, all right. So, and that is because that is part of what Moyo has given you on his birthday, all right. But please, at least read the book, all right. Because don't
What's
put it
the
in your
title
library.
of the book?
The title is called 10x Better: God's Strategy for Working Professionals and Business Owners to Dominate in the Marketplace.
So why don't you tell us a little bit more about some of the things that you covered in the book?
Okay. The reason why was I wrote the book was out of a personal experience. I've always done career coaching, executive coaching, and the higher I go, I realize that people start having this desire to move from success to significance. But many people never make that jump, all right? They just stay at the success dimension. And so, on one side is success or significance. On the other side, you go to church, you go to pastor. Moyo preached two weeks ago. I was watching the video, and Moyo will get to there and say, when in the last day, God will judge. Am I right? You hear all those things, and you're like, so do I focus on purpose, like you said, or focus on wealth building? But in the book of Daniel, I found something very powerful. I found something that probably I believe is a major solution to the world we live in. There's a lot of chaos. Dog eats dog in the marketplace. I mean, when you lose money, somebody gains money. Am I right?
Yeah.
That's actually what is going on. And I said to myself, all this Christianity, I used to pastor. I pastored 4 churches. And I got to a point I was tired, I was bored, I stepped down, all right? And I think it gave me an opportunity to review everything again. And I saw a concept called the concept of the kingdom of God, that's what God is doing in this time. And so I read the book of Daniel, and when I saw Daniel 120, it says, and Daniel and his friends were found 10 times better. That's 10x better. And from there, I found 5 dimensions of Daniel's life that basically made him outstanding. First, that the book of Daniel, a third about it was about prophecies, speaking about the future. And I realized that the people that thrive in any industry are people that are future-minded, all right? They understand what is going to go on in their field. They have the big picture thinking. The second dimension is the priesthood. Daniel did not define himself. And priesthood actually speaks about your state of productivity. People don't realize how much social media actually decimates their capacity to deliver great results. I found out that many billionaires have phones that don't have WhatsApp because they don't want anybody to reach them, actually. And what they're doing is that they're maintaining their personal environment to be highly productive. In many instances, I found number 3, that Daniel lived with a sense of purpose, all right, finding your why. Many times, one thing that can enable you to keep moving, no matter what, is when you are conscious of your purpose and the reason for existence. Number 4, the book of Daniel is filled with principles. There are many of them, from excellence to reading and all that. Guys, I think Mario spoke about it, diligence in whatever we're doing, because sometimes you can coast in your career. You can do what is required, particularly when you're bored. I remember there before. When you're bored at your job, you're just doing it because you need to pay the bills, but you know that there's a lot more. So diligence. And the last one is profits. Daniel was never broke. There was no record of Daniel being broke. In fact, one time, one king told him, I will give you, Daniel said, keep your money. I mean, I can imagine that, all right? Eventually, he took it, sharp guy. But what I found out was that he understood reward intelligence, that in every field, in all labor, there's profit. The problem many times is that many times people don't understand the intelligence of reward in that space. And that's what the book is about. But you'll find it. And then how can you be a light in the marketplace, all right? L meaning love. You don't need to preach to anybody first. Let people experience you. By this, I didn't know that you're my disciples when you love one another. I is insight and innovation, that people want to know the kind of insight or the innovation that you're bringing. They will respect your God more when you do that. G is godliness, all right, demonstrating God-likeness in the marketplace, because I understand that the marketplace is not black and white, it's gray, but some people are very dark gray right now. Am I right? If you know what I'm talking about, okay, take that. And then H is healing, that many times people will not come to church, but people will come to work. And many times the office is a great place for healing. A simple conversation, the right word that is spoken. And T speaks about truth. People are saying, my truth, my truth. At the end of the life, they realize there's only one truth at the end of the day. But you can actually pick that. And then S then speaks about salvation. And the idea is that if you bring love, insight, intelligence, innovation, godliness, healing, and truth, they will take your salvation. That will make us more effective in the marketplace.
Awesome. Thank you. Please read the book. Okay. All right. I think we struggled with the mic, but any questions? Yes. Go ahead.
Okay. I mean, it's going to be a question at the end, but I just want to appreciate, we call it PMO. I think I met him 13 years ago. I was at your 30th birthday.
No, that's right.
You know, and I've always looked at him like, I remember when I first met him, and when he said he was doing his 30th birthday, I said, this guy's 30. Like, his intelligence, the way he speaks, the way he shares things, I was like, oh my God, what am I doing with my life? So, I really want to say happy 40th. You've made so much impact. And, I mean, you don't know how much I respect you. I know you always call me different names, but no, definitely, you have to ask my wife. And really, you know, when you see Pimo, he has different aspects. Like, you know, I'm really, because you were throwing out numbers, and I can say I was part of it, and I'm part of it, you know. And when you said 400, if you had not said, I was going to ask you that question about that 400, 1.2 million. But I've seen your life, and you know, and you shared a few stories with me, and now listening to some of those stories, if I knew that you were foreclosed already, I would. I would have gone ahead and like, oh my God. So gone through all this, and I mean, I remember your first presentation you did, and all of us were there, and like this guy knows a lot of stuff, but again, so where am I going? Yeah, those things are true. 1.2 million. And I know one time we were doing book club too, and the way you speak, even when you have not read the book, it's as if you've read the whole book. It's not like this guy. Anyway, where I'm going is genius. Yeah. Where I'm going is you're so diligent. I always ask you, how do you do these things? I mean, you're better now. One like last year or 2 years ago, your eyes are always bloody red. I'm like, you're going to kill yourself. Where am I going is the last deal you did.
Yes.
I didn't know it was going to happen. I'm sure.
You didn't believe in me.
I believe in you so much.
I'm just joking.
Yeah, but I can remember even towards the last 2-3 weeks, you had this confidence. I mean, I remember the first time you shared it with me, I was like, oh, people here, people get, so people okay. But you kept on it, and I know faith is a big part of you. But because again, it's easy to throw out numbers. What made you have so much belief? I want to take faith out of it, that this thing was going to happen. Because I know what was at stake if the deal didn't go through.
I didn't know it was going to happen. I mean, the first deal that I talked about that we did $400,000, I'm signing documents, I'm committing to the buyer, etc. The last $125,000 for that deal came 2 days before we closed. But I was like, what's the worst that would happen? I'll lose my earnest money and, whatever, right? Same situation as well. When we were doing this last deal that you talked about, I didn't know it was going to happen. Like I already had $45,000 in earnest money on the line, and I'm like, well, just keep going. And thankfully, for some reason, we kept extending the deal. The deal kept looking better, but I knew that I got to a point where it's like, well, what's the worst that would happen? The worst that happens is cancel the deal and I lose my 45 grand. Whatever, right? So I think the point here is what I said is too many times, the next thing you can do is just slightly outside of what you're comfortable with. But what the normal, visceral primordial reaction that we have as human beings is to recoil, from that challenge. And we're like, what if this happens? No, I'm too scared, I don't want to. But what we have to do is just feel the fear and just lean in and see what happens. But I think there's enough evidence to show that there's, on average, growth on the other side of that, right? Would you lose? You wouldn't lose your life, but you'd learn a lot. You'd grow. So that's it. Well, I appreciate everything you said, right? I appreciate you. I love you too, brother. Any next?
I have one question.
Yes, sir.
Just one.
Okay.
So, I've known you for probably 12, 13 years now. It's been a long time.
Yeah, it's been a while. You had 30th birthday too.
Yes, I was there. So, you've been both a business person and a career person.
Yeah.
I've seen you do both of them. I have no idea how you do it. There is no way I sit down and I think, at times I'll say, hey, people, check this thing out. When can we go see it? And you're like, yeah, we can see it tomorrow. Like, how is he finding the time to do it? So how do you strike that balance?
Yeah, so balance is an interesting concept, right? I think sometimes people think, balance is everything operating at equal. But that's not how it works, right? I heard someone give the analogy that balance is like a ship that's sailing on water. There's no point in time where that thing is steady. It's always moving this way and that way. So some things suffer at some point in time in your life, and some other things, would receive the attention. The truth is, unfortunate as it sounds, is there are times when, my family takes the hit significantly. Because I'm working on something at a particular point in time. There are times when, I might have a slow period, at work. but the point is, I never want anything to suffer to the point where it's below what is acceptable, right? So I never want my job to suffer to the point where my employers are like, dude, like, WTH, like, what are you doing? I never want my, relationship with my wife, my kids to get to a point where it's like, okay, like, we don't need all of this, man. Just like be around. But it's always a sacrifice, and sometimes that sacrifice is a time sacrifice, right? It's like I do my job, and I remember the first deal that we talked about, right? Even the last deal that we worked on, multiple times I'm up till 3 a.m., just like working on the deck, running some analysis, putting together a list of investors to hit up. But I still have to be at my job at 9:30. I still have to drop my kids off at school. So yeah, with the sleeps, Gotosh made jokes about like my eyes. Yeah, would all of those things be impacted? Yes, it would be. But the thought here is you just keep putting in the work. But then the other thing in there is also the fact that there's for every single one of us, there's something we're capable of doing like that. We all have that. You just got to find what that is and apply yourself to it, right? Because when you find yourself doing what that thing is, people will look at you and be like, dude, like how do you do this as well? That's just my thing, and I'm doing it, right? But each and every one of us has that thing as well, where you do it as well. You put in so much work, you wouldn't think about it, and I would look at you and be like, man, how do you do this? It's nothing special. Thank you. Yeah.
Question, how have you been able to manage relationships? Because I know, I mean, everybody speaks about all your great qualities, but the reality is, I mean, you've been working with people to get stuff done. Just share with us how you build relationships. I mean, you've got friends you had from college, some people don't even have good friends for a year. How do you manage to keep all these people and you make them all feel special?
Yeah. So for one, I really value people. I just so I work in investment banking that lends itself to type A plus plus type people. Those are the types of people that I work with. Might not be obvious or apparent. I'm also like that, right, as well. Um, but the difference is that I don't believe that people have to suffer for me to get ahead. Um, and that has just always been a core part of my philosophy on how I interact with people in relationships, right? Is so I value people, I respect people. Every time I'm recruiting, and I said this when Bola came into our offices, I'm like, look, my job is hard enough. Like, this job is difficult as it is, right? I don't need jackasses, like, in my world as well. Neither do I need to be one, right, in that setting. But if I can eliminate that, then there's a way we can all go through this difficulty together and come out at the end of the day, right, in a healthy way. So that's just my personal philosophy. So anytime I'm in the space with people, I just always want them to feel a little better about themselves. I want them to feel a little bit more inspired about their life. I want them to feel a little bit more capable about themselves as well. And that's what I try to do. Of course, it lends itself to coming off as a people pleaser as well, right? Which arguably, maybe I have some of those traits, right? And I need to sort of dial it down a little bit, right? But at the end of the day, I think love wins. I think people matter. And if you just kind of go through life that way, you don't sweat the small stuff. And also the thought that people can't really. So I'm Christian, and I fundamentally believe that the outcomes of my life are not determined by how people treat me. So if I believe that, then it shouldn't necessarily be my motivation to try to balance out the skills of life if I truly believe what it is that I say that I believe. So that then has become like an ethos by which I live my life as well. So, yes, sir.
What was your approach to finding? You mentioned in the last response to the last question, like staying up till 3 a.m. And we could all find that thing, where we're willing to do that.
Yeah.
From experience as well, there are those things where it's not the thing, but maybe something we're trying to force ourselves to do, where that's just much harder. So, what was your approach to finding the thing or the things, that keep you?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So, first of all, it's by trying a bunch of different things, right? So, trying, so there's a self-reflection aspect of it, right? Where people are like, where you're like, you're looking at yourself and there are just some things that resonate with you. And please, PJ, I'd like you to speak to this as well. There are certain things that resonate with you. You pick those things up and you apply yourself to them. I think sometimes people quit too quickly on those things and they're like, that's probably not my thing, right? But to your point, there gets to be a point in your life where you just know that, man, I'm forcing this. This is not it, right? It's hard to articulate, but that's one way to get there. And of course, the implication of that is that you would have failures along the way, right? But a failure is never a finality except you stay there, right? So it then becomes like, what did I learn from this in that situation? What did I learn about myself in that situation as well? The other thing is pay attention to, so there's like active and passive feedback. Passive feedback is just pay attention to what people say you're good at. Oh, Moyo can, manage relationships. I'm registering all these things, right? Because it then tells me like, okay, you know what? Maybe this is what I need to start like applying more to. But then there's also active feedback, like where you're asking people like, hey, what do you think I'm good at, right? And just kind of listen to people tell you about that stuff. And all of that, you collate all of that and you start working on it. You start applying yourself to it. Again, you're not going to develop everything all at once. That's why it's potential. Like you might pick like one or two things, you develop those things, and you get like a nice, progression there. And then you might pick a couple of other things as well. Then you start developing those as well. And then all of a sudden, you have like all the balls like are moving in the air, and you're consistently developing those things. I think that's how it happens for me. Some balls will drop off, which is like failure. That's okay. You just like keep moving that way. But then the things that really matter people would start recognizing that value in you, and then it starts reinforcing itself for you to keep going as well. I'd like to hear what you have to say about that.
Everything is said. I think that just to piggyback of I believe that a lot of discovery lies at the end of exploration. And what that means in essence is that sometimes take a bet on yourself. If you find out, inherently success requires you to be interested in what you're doing because it sustains you. That's actually the pipeline from where passion comes from. But I think people don't explore their interests enough. So, for example, he says that he was studying engineering and then he moved to finance. I think it probably started from an interest in that area. But again, navigating that transition is what a lot of people are afraid of. So, number one is I think that people should try to explore. And exploration doesn't have to be something very extreme. You don't have to change your job. You can go and, for example, somebody's doing something in alignment to what you're thinking about doing. You know what, can I just be part of that project to observe, to see? Sometimes you get there like, I'm not interested at all. All right, it could be a little project you can do by the side. I think ultimately everybody has 24 hours. And sometimes we need to do an audit of where we're spending our 24 hours. And we find out that we can actually be more effective with our time, and then we can now reallocate that time to other things. I think one other thing I would say is that at some point, if you deactivate fear in your life, you will do a lot more.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people are not able to move far or as fast as they should because they're afraid. And fear is a learned competence, actually. So if you remember, when we were much younger, look at the room, so most of us know Superman, am I right? Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, the one. So when we watched it back then, once you finish watching part one or part two, you go to your mother's wardrobe, am I right? You pick some, wrapper, you tie it on your neck, am I right? You climb to the top of the staircase, and just before you just, hey, 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 But you are not afraid because you believed, all right? Thank God they stopped you, by the way, all right? But that capability, actually psychology shows that children are born as geniuses. By the age of 2, that capacity drops to about 20%. 10% of that. By the age of about 20 or so, it drops to less than 2%. Then we now say this guy's a genius. Actually, people have to learn fear. That's why in Africa, if you're in a house and you hear a loud sound outside, then you run inside. In America, I watch movies, there's a loud sound outside and somebody say, let me take a torchlight to go and check. I'm like, this. So it's unconscious, but for us black people, when you hear anything danger, you face the other direction. But the other people, am I right? They tend to go and explore that. And that's why a lot of innovation actually comes from that. Now, many of them lose their lives. Or it's part of the equation, am I right? Yeah. Many of us are alive, but I like to do what? So I think that somehow you have to get to the point where you realize that, you know what? I have to believe God. I'm not going to die. I'm going to be fine. Even if you get foreclosed, what are the extreme things that can happen? Now, de-risk your life as much as possible. Yeah. I'm not trying to get you to go and do something that doesn't make sense. But at some point, you have to walk on water. It's just the way life is designed. Today, we're looking at, even Donald Trump, he had to walk on water. You might not like him. You get my point? But the fact about it is that these guys, that is the reason why they are where they are. So somehow you have to master your fear. And you will always feel fear. Always feel fear. That's the thing. But somehow you have to go ahead. They said that courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to go forward in spite of fear. All right, yeah. Stop there.
Thanks. Let me then, Josh. Thanks.
I'll be very I want to ask a question because we're talking about momentum, right? So one of the biggest holdback for people, usually in investment, impact, or profit making, is usually their risk tolerance factor, right? So, which usually is developed over time, right? Yeah. So my question is, how do you increase your risk tolerance factor, which, of course, affect the impact you make?
Yeah. So that's a very good question, right? And it's part of the answer is what PJ just said around fear. I tell people that risk in and of itself is never the problem, right? But you have to learn how to manage risk, right? So people say high risk, high reward. That's not true. High risk that is managed properly is what yields high reward. High risk leads you to wipeouts. But the problem is a lack of understanding, right? So to what he said, when you observe that there's an opportunity that presents itself as a crisis moment or as a risk, moment, the question then becomes, the average person is like, oh, what are all the things that could go wrong? Ah, man, I'm out. Okay, what are all the things that could go wrong? Okay, how do you take care of all of those situations such that I don't get wiped out? And someone articulates it, gives you knowledge, you understand it, and so on and so forth. And you say, you know what? That all makes sense to me. How do I put controls such that I don't misbehave, right? Because when I'm in fight or flight mode, I'm not necessarily thinking, but how do I put controls in place so that when I step into this situation, I know exactly how I'm supposed to react and play out? Because I listened to the flight recording of one plane that was crashing. I think this was like the plane that was going to land in the Hudson River many years ago. There was a movie that was made about it. I mean, the pilot, that was a risky situation that he was embarking on, but he played it out in a very controlled manner. Why? Because when you start rehearsing how you're going to act in a situation, when you start rehearsing how you're going to, step into a moment of crisis and what you're going to do, when you get into those moments, you then start doing what it is that you're supposed to do. But guess what? You've already expanded your capacity in doing that, right? So everything Pastor Jimmy said, plus what it is that I've said, is ultimately how you do that. And then slowly and slowly, you start expanding your appetite. And then you can decide, you know what? I don't want any more risk. Forget everything you said about potential. I'm okay here, But some people just keep pushing the limits, and they're like, you know what, I'm going to take a little bit more risk. I'm going to take a bigger risk. I was listening to a video of Aliko Dangote, and he talked about taking a loan from some consortium of financiers in Africa, and the loan interest rate was in like high 30%. I'm like, there's no business, no matter how much money you tell me, there's no business, at least at the point that I was in, that I'm going to take an interest loan that's 30+%. But guess what? He must have trained himself to the point where he understood what he was doing. Guess what? He went into the project, did the entire project, and said, I paid everyone back. He learned it, and he did it.
I mean, as you were speaking, the thing that came to my mind, I'm trying to use you. So, everybody knows Moyo pumps iron, am I right? I pump food. That's what I do, okay? So, and the way it works is that your capacity, your strength grows with the more resistance you take on over a period of time. There's always a period of pain, which is what we always try to avoid. We want the muscles without the pain. So I think that from my own understanding, if I even look at my own story and then the people that I've coached, that I've worked with, that are doing a lot of bigger things, they were willing to go through the valley, the dark moments, all right? And I think that somehow we've been taught unconsciously that to succeed, you have to avoid failure. No. You don't even think failure, you think your results. You think the goal you want to, you de-risk it, like you said, you naturally go along. So I think that, because the question you said, how do you build it? I think number one, it's built over time. So this is what I say to people. The earlier you start building it, the greater it's going to be.
That's right.
In fact, the Bible says it is good for a man to bear his yoke when? In his youth.
In his youth,
Because I realized that the older you grow, you realize that every decision I have to make, it will affect my wife, it will affect my children, and all that. But I tell you that one other thing that is there is this, that even though time might have gone for you, you need to realize that if it's still tugging at your heart, still go for it.
That's right.
Because if you keep giving yourself excuses, the wall of regret is built with the block of excuses. One excuse after the other. The reason why I can't do it today is because of this, because of this. Start doing something. Start training yourself in that regard, all right? So talking about real estate and all that, have what they call lesson money. Money that they told you that fundamental principle about investment is don't invest what will make you lose your life. Am I right? So you start, but some people don't even start doing that. They don't push, and they stay in their comfort zone. So if you really want to develop, the same way, if Moyo takes off his shirt, you will know who has been pumping something. Am I right? Okay. But the fact about it is that before he started carrying all the heavy weights, he started carrying, I'm still in the female section. Those 20 kg ones? That's where I am, all right? So let me stop there.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think we got time for one more. Josh, go ahead.
My question is very similar to what he asked, but I'll take a different direction. So we talk about fear being a driving factor against success. We talk about risks and being able to take risks, but earlier on we also talked about competence. And we talk about you doing things for a long time, but are you taking the steps to make sure you're mastering those skills? And so my question is, when do you make the decision to step back, master a skill, and then when do you decide, okay, I'm gonna go take a risk? Because if we just decide let's take risks, there's always gonna be a fall. So how do you navigate when to step back and have mastery, and then when do you move over to, okay, let's take a risk?
I'm going to try to answer your question just based on what I know about you. So it might not answer the question in a way that is responsive, at least to everyone else. So Josh, you're a producer, you make music, right? So you're good at what you do, you put yourself out there. I mean, you just won a competition, shout out to you, right? And won some money doing that. You took a risk, right? You took a risk to put yourself out there, told all your family members, all your friends, hey, spread the word. You could have not won. And you could have felt shame, right? But you took the chance. Why? Because you have certain talents and abilities that are on the inside of you. And you're like, you know what, if I put in the work to do this right, there's a real shot that I can actually, hit the bullseye here, which you did. So Are there other skills? Are there other things that you have on the inside of you that you can potentially work on? Absolutely, as you should, because to your point, now you've hit that goal. Ultimately, you want to make beats for folks and you want them to come and you want them to pay you money for it and whatnot. You want to be big time in what it is that you do. Maybe there are other skills that you need to develop as well, right? And somewhere on the inside of you, you're probably thinking like, this is a skill that I need to develop, right, as well. Then you have to go work on that as well. And then there's going to be another opportunity for you to put that out there and take another chance as well. It might mean you have to spend some money to do some things. That's a risk. And you're saying to yourself like, well, what if I deploy all this cash and it doesn't work out? I don't know. But what if it does work out and it gets you to where it is that you want to get to in life, right? Do you understand what I'm talking about, right? So I think that's how you should think about all of these different things, right? You ultimately would have to, your heart will guide you. And so it's some of these things that there's no prescription in terms of how you have to do it, but your heart's going to guide you on where it is that you need to spend your time. And the last thing that I would say is, for you specifically, is there's probably an aspect on how do I sell the value that I have to people. You know, there was a time that PJ was teaching people about selling, and for a lot of us, we think like, oh, salesmen are sleazy and whatnot. But at the end of the day, your value gets communicated in the context of a marketplace. If you cannot communicate the value that you're providing to people in the marketplace, you can't capture that value. That's another skill to develop. Selling something is also taking a chance because the risk that you face is that you're going to get rejected. People have a morbid fear of rejection as well. So that's something else to think about. Okay. Well, that's it.